2 nut trees, 3 fruiting vines, 12 fruit trees, and 27 fruiting bushes on 6,000 square feet of small yard. Stay tuned. We're doing a yard tour.
Okay, here we are. This is an overhead view of my property, and you can see that there were no trees here when we started. It was pretty barren. There was a couple of little perennial bushes here. There's still a perennial bush here and a couple here when we started. There was also a walnut right here that the squirrels planted that I'm using as a trellis, and a little walnut right here. It's actually getting to be a little bit bigger now. And there's actually here hiding in this little hedgerow that already existed when I got here, there was a mulberry tree that the birds had planted here. So that's also there, and that's not counting as part of these trees in my count. So these large green circles are my fruit trees. I put some in the front yard for the neighbors. These pink indicate bushes. So here we have, I try for 2 fruit bushes under every fruit tree. Some of them have died over time, so I don't get all of my fruit bushes that I like, but you got to keep trying. And the yellow indicate my nut trees. So here's a nut tree. This is a heart nut. This is a big canopy tree, and this will be a potential canopy tree, but I'm going to keep them trimmed back. And this is the walnut that was existing. And again, there is a walnut here that I don't have mapped out because I'm thinking about replacing it for something that's in the Fabaceae family, so it could be a nitrogen fixer. And right now it's being used as a living trellis for this grape right here. So these orange ones are indicating my fruit vines. I have a grape here and a grape here and a kiwi here. There's actually a grape here in the hedge as well. And then this dark brown here, these are actually rootstock. So these are rootstock that I had dug up and planted, and I do plan on making some of these into fruiting trees by overgrafting them with some kind of high quality fruit tree once I decide exactly which variety I like the best. And these two, I actually had put them really close together thinking I was going to dig them out and bring them to someone else's lot. At this point, they're getting pretty big, so I may end up removing one and overgrafting the other, and that will be a plan. But here you are, here's the layout, and then I'll take you through my yard where you can see what it actually looks like when you're on the ground. And also, you know, I've got garden spaces, so here's my stairs coming off my back porch. All this is garden space here. I've got a garden space on a swale wrapping around this these 2 blueberry bushes that are here. I've got a big keyhole garden, a small keyhole garden right here that is kind of my son's play area. He gets to do whatever he wants in that garden. Then I have a larger keyhole garden right here where we've done the majority of our main plantings as well. And then there's a garden space right here. So while there's a kind of like a winter garden, so while this is a raspberry bush, while this raspberry bush isn't prolific and shading out with all of its leaves during the winter months, I plant winter crop like spinach or something like that, and I'll put a little hoop cover over that just to keep it warm enough to grow. And again, around every single tree, you'll see my mulch layer that I put in, so it can act like little mini garden spaces as well. Now that I have them filled up, I focus more on the perennials, but in the first few years when there were not perennials here, I had a lot more greens and chards and kales and other things that were planted. These were all planted within 3.5 years, so we're not even in our 4th year of planting yet. So let me take you outside and you can see what that looks like.
Well, let's start in the front yard. So this is my green strip here. And as you can see, I've started to fill it out quite a bit. So this first tree right here, this is a cherry tree. These are both red buds, eastern red buds. They're Fabaceae family, so they're actually nitrogen fixing. So these trees will help feed the fruit trees on this side. So with these trees here, this is a Bing cherry tree. And under the cherry tree, I've got a raspberry bush. I've got a whole bunch of irises and some herbs. Those are cilantro that actually reseeded themselves from last year. And then on the backside there, there's another raspberry that I've got going on. So I try to put in 2 fruit bushes per fruit tree if possible. Right here next to this is an apricot tree, which is, we got fruit the first time this last season and it was delicious. You guys already saw the video where we put in mint, and here's that mint coming in. So we've wrung all of these things with a ring of mint, and a lot of it is coming in nicely. And then we had a raspberry bush that we put in last season there that is going off and is spreading. So we've got raspberry everywhere. We've also got some rhubarb right here that we put in to try to take up some space. And in the back there is a gooseberry as well. So we got gooseberry and raspberry are the fruiting bushes at the base of this tree. I've got room here. I could actually put in maybe another fruit tree there. So here's another fruit tree. So the idea of the plants at the green strip is if we harvest them, great. If neighbors want to have some fruit, that's why they're there. Anybody can have fruit. So here's yet another cherry tree. There's a blueberry bush in there, and there was another bush here, but I think that the rabbits got it this last season. I like to encircle things with irises and different fruits. I've got a lot of garlic and chive as well. So in this case, there's a lot of onion and garlic and some chives growing in here as well. So you could really get a lot of productivity out of these small spaces by just filling them in and maximizing. So you can see a perfect example of the mulch ring. I like to put a mulch ring down as I mow, which I just did. Sometimes I'll dump the grass back on top of that to help feed it even more. So let's head into the backyard. I've got a compost pile right here where I just keep this old swimming pool on there to keep things moist. This is actually, I dig up a lot of trees from parking lots. This is a cherry, a wild cherry, and then this is one of those drooping cherries. And the idea there was I was gonna cut those and graft onto them at some point, but I've been planting out my in-laws property, which got a lot more space, and I kind of just let these do their thing. So right now they're just wild root stock, but they could become productive fruit trees with a few simple grafts. This at the base of my compost pile, I actually have a swale right here because there's a slight hill coming down from my yard, and in on the base of that swale I actually dumped all those grass clippings when I just mowed today. I need to spread those out and cover the walking path of the swale. Then I built up with logs this raised bed, and in this area I've got a fruit bush here that is a brand new blueberry, and then there's another blueberry in here as well, hiding in the mass of spinach that is now starting to bolt. It's going to go to seed, and I'll let some of that reseed itself. This is sassafras logs that I turned into a trellis. Some snap peas growing right now, which is good to eat. A little garden snack. At the base of my steps there, when you come down the steps, you actually get a strawberry garden right here. So I've got a strawberry garden at the base of my steps, and the strawberries are just becoming ready to harvest again for another round. I got a fruit bush right there. That's a blueberry and another blueberry. And the idea was there was going to be a tree in the middle, but I killed that tree with my weed whacker. And I never got to planting another one. But this is an apple tree right here. There are some apples on that apple tree starting to form. And there's a goji bush right there. So that's a berry bush. They're kind of some tart, bitter fruit. So we dry those and we use them in smoothies and things like that. But again, around every fruit tree, I got this ring of mulch. And that ring of mulch allows me to plant things. So here I've got a lot of herbs. I got mint and cilantro. I had a broccoli here, and that has gone to seed now. And there's also some strawberries in here as well. So maximizing, filling the space wherever we can. Here we've got a plum tree. And again, that famous ring of mulch that I like to do. This is actually kind of like a keyhole garden, where I can walk in. Right here's a little walking path, and I've got strawberries all ringing around this. So there's all strawberries, and they're starting to go off as well. And then coming up around the back side of my yard, I got a raspberry patch right there coming up the steps. And before the raspberries started to grow in and fill in all the space, and during the winter when the light comes through, I actually plant spinach. And this little microclimate gets shaded by the wind, so sometimes there's a frost line right here. So everything on that side stays a little bit less frosty. A little bit of that reflective heat that comes off of these walls as well. So this is a blueberry bush. It's not the happiest blueberry bush. It's looking a little yellow. And then we had a blueberry bush there, but it got killed out. I think maybe the rabbits got it this winter. So that's the immediate backyard, upper yard. All of these are cypress trees that I dug out from my in-laws' property, and I've been trying to put them along here to make a nice little hedgerow so that I can block the wind. So this is one of the fruit vines. This is a grape, See, we got some really nice grapes coming in. And this grape actually climbs up over this fence here. And one tree I didn't count in the count was actually this walnut tree. So I suppose that's 3 nut trees, but maybe I didn't count it because in my mind, I'm going to be probably cutting it back or down. Walnut is a juglanaceae. A walnut has the chemical compound juglone, and that can actually be hazardous to other plants. So I might replace this with an actual arbor, but I am right now using it as a living trellis for the grapevines. So I kind of don't want to replace it. And if I am going to replace it, and maybe it'll be with something that is a fast growing nitrogen fixing fabaceae tree instead. So it can be a support tree and not a tree that'll potentially poison the trees next to it. Because I do like this plum growing here. And on this plum tree, I even got a graft going right here. So here's a graft. This is a cherry graft from the front yard that I brought back onto this backyard, because you can graft any prunus to each other. A peach tree, and then a shea melon berry tree. I've got a fruiting bush here with this and a fruiting bush with that. They're both blueberry bushes. This is actually a small patch. It's like a little micro nursery. This is a small patch of plum trees, and I need to dig those out and go move them over to my in-laws' property. And then I'll come back. These are from seedlings. I'll come back and I'll overgraft something that's a well-known fruiting variety that we've picked. This is an aronia berry. It's very bitter, very tart berry, but it grows really well. You can see that they're starting to fruit. What I'll do with these is I'll dry them and use those as well in smoothies and things like that. Strawberry patch going in between the other fruit bush. This is a Juneberry, so this isn't a fruit tree, but it's not a bush. It's kind of going to get maybe about 7 feet tall or so, but I'll keep chopping it and letting it bush out. These don't have, this is a pear, and that is another shea melonberry, and both of those don't have their fruit bushes around them. So at this point, I could be fitting into 4 more fruit bushes right here, and I could be putting another fruit bush there, and another fruit bush here as well. So we could be putting even more fruit bushes. Another pear tree. So this is a pear tree. It's just starting to take off. All these trees were planted in the last 3 years, so there wasn't that much time on these trees, and yet some of them are bigger than others. This is a peach tree here. Actually killed it, and then it came back from its rootstock. So this is the rootstock of the peach tree, and that's why you see such vigorous growth. And I've actually just this year grafted a few branches on it, and then once those grafts take and look like they're successful, I'll take some of the other non-graft branches down. Back here is going to be an overstory. This is a heart nut. This is my nut tree, another one of the nut trees, heart nut. And it's going to be a living trellis for this grapevine. But then I moved in this chicken coop here, and now I've got this grapevine going along this fence, and it grows up and over my chicken coop, so I can have grapes shading my chickens in the summer, and then the grapevines die back during the winter and exposes the sun to the chickens, so they have a little warmth from the sun during the winter months when they need it. This is like a little keyhole garden here, and right now it's a little overgrown. A couple of small tomato plants started. I got a fruit bush over there, I got a blueberry bush over here, and I've got some snap peas here as well growing. So coming through my kind of getting jungly over here. In this back corner, this is another apple tree, and this does have a few apples on it, really small. And there's another blueberry bush hiding here in the corner. So there's a blueberry bush. This is actually a kiwi vine that's planted right here in this corner. So the kiwi vine and the grape kind of fight, and they fight over the apple. So everything, I have my plants planted pretty close together. So it takes a little bit more pruning than most people might want to partake in. But I'd rather the plants fight and may the strong survive. Right? I want something that'll grow like a weed. And this is a blackberry bush. This is a thornless blackberry, and I planted that here, and these things go crazy. Gives me so many fruit every year, and also they tip root, so then I get more cuttings. So this is about a 27-foot run of fence here, and I have blackberry vines just planted all across the fence. See the outside of the fence here. I like to put a lot of fruit trees along my perimeters because I want my neighbors to be able to have fruit. I want to share in the abundance. It's half the fun. And you can see I have yet another row of these hedge plants. These are cypress. Again, I dug all of these out of my in-laws property because they just got them growing wild everywhere. What's nice about these is they're going to be wind blocks, but also during the winter months when everything else dies back, these will stay evergreen and provide me protection. So I came back and I replanted some small ones in between. So I have cypress moving all the way down this line. And you can see I'm letting them grow out wide. And at some point I'm going to start regulating the height so they top off. I think I topped that one just this year. But if you come from this view, I keep them really, really thin because I want to be able to walk in here and pick these beautiful blackberries. And I want to be able to walk right here because I want to be able to have my yard. So I have a really thin but wide cypress tree. So that's what I got going on here. And that's my hedge. And you know what? I didn't count as a fruit tree, but it totally is. There's a volunteer mulberry tree that is starting to give fruit, and that's that tall tree right there in this back corner. So I suppose that's 13 fruiting trees. And what I didn't count as fruit trees as well in that count is actually my rootstock. So that's a rootstock. I dug this up. This is a wild cherry, and I'm going to overgraft this with one of my prunuses, probably a cherry because I've been enjoying the cherries, but maybe the apricot from the front yard because that's also a really good thing. And then that'll be a 14th fruit tree. So yeah, I didn't count that mulberry back there, which we totally have. And really, this is yet another rootstock that I dug up, which will become another fruit tree. So that'll be yet another fruit tree. So there's 2 rootstocks just in this backyard that I pointed out that I'm going to turn into fruit trees. And this mulberry tree right here that I'd never counted in my count. But you can see we're getting mulberries. That was a small one there. Delicious. Also, I got things that didn't make the count either, like this hazelnut. This is a small hazelnut. It's going to start growing. The rabbits almost got it, but it didn't. I dig up a lot of seedlings. When I see seedlings growing, I dig them up. This seedling is a plum. These are all plum seedlings, and again, a little mini plum patch because I just didn't want to put them all in pots. So I figured if they grow out, then I'll dig them up and move them. So I've got a little patch of plums here that I need to move out into my in-laws' property where they have a lot more space than I do. They got acres and acres, and I'm trying to plant that out. Yet another rootstock, not on my count, but this could be overgrafted and turn into a fruit tree that I either grow right here on site or I dig up and move to my in-laws as well. So it never hurts to have more trees than you need, right? These are volunteers. There's actually a volunteer. The squirrels planted that. That's a walnut tree. And right now we're just leaving it for shade. At some point I'll probably just completely remove that one because I like having the fruit trees more than the nut trees on this particular lot just because of the size. And then there's one of the nut trees that I did count. That's also another walnut that was planted. And I believe the squirrels probably planted that as well. But that was here when I got here. So there you have it. Tons of fruit trees, tons of nut trees, lots and lots of berry bushes, berry vines, berries everywhere, fruit everywhere. I'm a big fan of perennials. And in the meantime, while they're not completely taking over and shading things out, I can plant annuals underneath them, put my garden spaces underneath them. And at some point, it'll just be mostly perennials here. And my job will be to come through and prune these trees, take out the excess branches, mulch them down, maybe do that once a year, right? So it's very minimal work on my side because I mulch the trees. They'll feed themselves with the mulch as a fertilizer. It'll also remediate the soil. This is just very clay, hard, compact clay soils. So the mulch that I put in really helps. Tons of fruit trees on 6,000 square feet of land. Anybody can do it. On my last property, I also did a very similar thing. I think I have like 40 fruit trees on a quarter acre. You can do it everywhere. Don't think, oh, just because I have a little space, that's all I could do. Now, with that being said, I plan on hyper pruning my trees, right? So I plant them a little closer together than some might. But you know what? It's always easier to kill a 10-year-old tree than it is to plant a tree 10 years ago. So get started and remediate the world. Thank you for joining. See you next time. If you like this kind of content, do me a solid and subscribe, because then I'll know that I'm making the right kind of information that you guys like to see. I'd be happy to put out more videos like this. I'd be happy to do a yard tour at the bigger property that we're working on as well. I'm a huge fan of fruit. I love fruit. I eat fruit. Everybody eats fruit. I really love fruit trees, and I've been putting fruit trees in the ground now for quite some time. and I just keep doing it. Every time I have a bare patch of land, I put some fruit trees in it. I dig up fruit trees, I plant fruit trees. See you next time.